Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name's Jackson Danner alongside my good friend Omar Borja. Omar, today it's hard to believe that we are wrapping up the college football regular season, man. Only 2 more weeks left. We're heading in obviously to week 12 and really got this traditional cupcake week that isn't half bad, honestly, better than it has been in years past. And then we've got the Thanksgiving games, and then we're looking at conference championships. But first and foremost, man, how you doing today? Looking forward to the XFL draft pretty soon.
Oh yeah. So the XFL quarterback draft. I am very saddened that Luis Perez is no longer New Jersey General, but the Generals keep marching on. They're gonna keep marching on without Luis Perez, even though he's my favorite quarterback in all pro sports. I'm one of the probably one of at least under 100 owners of a Luis Perez jersey, Birmingham Iron. But I'm glad to see some young talent out here, like a lot of guys that I saw, like or at least two quarterbacks that I watched in the Spiral Tropical Bowl last year, making the XFL. Anthony Russo, who led Temple to some bowl appearances, or to two straight, or was it three straight bowl appearances from 2017 to 2019. Drew Plitt, one of my favorites, Arizona Bowl MVP, even had a punt in that game too back in 2020. I mean, so just a lot of talent. A lot of good quarterback talent so far, and we'll see who else ends up. There's an Army punter, Zach Harding, that is in the XFL draft pool. So wherever he lands, I'll likely be a fan. So, but yeah, otherwise doing great. The season's winding down. You mentioned final 2 weeks for FBS, FCS. This is the final week before the bracket gets announced. So there's a lot of scenarios that need to play out, which I'll detail in the games to watch, but just an exciting week, just reading through all these scenarios and what has to happen. So I'm excited.
In the future, when we do see a FBS level college football playoff expansion, do you think we will be sacrificing any of our regular season? Or do you think it's going to be the conference championships that are at stake, or neither? Are we heading more towards a 16, 17 game NFL season?
I don't think we'll sacrifice any regular season games. Honestly, I think we're heading more towards an expanded regular season. Excuse me. And of course, the schools that'll probably struggle with this the most are Army and Navy. So we'll figure out what happens to Army and Navy after the playoff expands. But yeah, I don't think they're gonna take any games away from the regular season because of how lucrative it is for a lot of schools, and not just Power Fives, but more so Group of Five schools and FCS schools that need the paycheck games to, fund other sports.
Omar, something that you are probably more well versed on than I am, but I just came to realize earlier this week that Army Navy is of much more than just historical or sentimental significance. Like, this is like we've seen it where the college football playoff committee was actually willing to postpone their final meetings until the conclusion of Army Navy. Something that I didn't realize whenever I forget what year it was, where there were some talkings about Navy going to the New Year's Six Bowl, or to a New Year's Six Bowl and representing the Group of Five. So that was something that I didn't realize was possible, and something I learned earlier this week, and something that I, like I said, just didn't know.
Yeah, 2016 was that year, but yeah, I mean, so we'll see what goes from there, especially with a lot more parity in the Group of Five and in the American for Navy. So yeah, we'll see. But
All
yeah,
this like hype around like Tulane SMU that we were hyping up like in September, all of this just for it to end up being UCF, who is like, I hate to use this word, but maybe the most unappreciative of all the Group of Five schools of representing that. So kind of a shame, but it
don't
happens.
speak too soon though, because I mean, Tulane can still clinch a spot in the American title game if they beat Cincinnati. Well, if they win out.
I would love to see Pratt out there. Man, we've been hyping that man up for a long time. So would love to see Michael Pratt represent. Absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and go into our HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch. Omar, I'll go ahead and let you go first. I do want to clarify, though, as we're seeing a lot of these invites for pretty much all the All-Star games, right? You see it for the Hula Bowl, for the Senior Bowl, the HBCU Pigskin Showdown. we're getting these invites. We want to go ahead and start talking about some of these guys that we know are going to be playing, right? We're not going to be like, well, we'd really love to see like Coach Williams and Coach Corum invite him out. No, he's already going to Selma. He's already going out there to Alabama, and gonna get to see him play for sure. So Omar, I'll let you go ahead and go with your first ever confirmed Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with a school that has not gotten a lot of a spotlight in the SWAC. I'm gonna go with Ja'Cory Rankin from Mississippi Valley State. And of course, it's been a rough go for Mississippi Valley State this year. They recently won their first game against Alabama A&M on national TV on Thursday night. Nonetheless, a little bit sweet there. But Ja'Cory Rankin's a 5'9", 180 receiver, JUCO product. He only has 27 catches on the year, but he has 5 touchdowns. So, very much a big play type of guy. The year before, he had 682 receiving yards and had a long catch of 93 yards. This is a guy, of course, with the size. You can see him returning kicks. He's returned 13 kicks in his career for 199 yards. And I want to give a spotlight to guys like this. Like, this is what all-star games are all about, especially the ones before Christmas time, because back in the day, the Blue Gray Classic, one of our favorite things to talk about on this podcast, gave a lot of small school players and players that missed out on players that were on teams that missed out on bowl games, gave them a chance to shine in front of national TV. And so here we are. We have a guy like Ja'Cory Rankin, for a lot of these schools that either their schools missed the Division II playoffs if they're part of the SEAC or the CIAA, or they missed out of the Celebration Bowl if they're part of the SWAC and the MEAC. So Ja'Cory Rankin here on a team that has, I think, one win still. Yeah, on a 1-9 team, likely to be 1-10 against Prairie View, on a 1-10 team, to give his school some spotlight, get a couple catches, maybe return some kicks in front of national TV on the first Saturday of bowl season. So Ja'Cory Rankin, 5'9", 180 guy, playmaker, could see him returning kicks in the pros. But I mean, again, he hasn't done it much in his career, but hopefully he gets a heavy dose in the preseason or in the XFL or USFL, whichever league he ends up in.
Oh, well, that's something that we talk about all the time, is the genuine need for these guys to be able to contribute on special teams, because that's the way that they're going to make these NFL 53-man rosters, right? Is you have to play special teams unless you're really a star on the team, or it's otherwise, I don't want to say negotiated on the contract, but there probably is not going to be like any sort of incentive thrown in there, like a lot of contracts do have for special team snaps. So yeah, absolutely, man. Would love to see him develop in that area. I like to think that that's what some programs are not known for by any means, but they do a good job of making sure that even their playmakers that might not have a guaranteed shot in the NFL, like they play special teams. You think of like Notre Dame and teams like that, right? Where you see that a lot. So would love to see him getting more involved and obviously keep doing his thing in his own position. I'm going to go ahead and go with my HBCU Pigskin Showdown Player of the Week to watch, Isaiah Cox, the wide receiver from Alabama A&M, a transfer from Ohio. So if you recognize the name and you watch a lot of action, that might be why. Just a straight speedster, man. When at Ohio, he had this one touchdown that I was watching on this past week where he was in the slot. He was the slot receiver, right? It was a fake screen against cover one, and the corner bit, and man, he just outran him and the lone safety at the top. It was, oh my gosh, it was beautiful to watch. Isaiah also played running back and defensive back in high school, so he hasn't exclusively been a receiver, and you can really see that comfortability and former running back in him, especially on special teams. He had a kickoff return for 65 yards just a couple days ago against Jackson State. Man, he's comfortable in space. You also see that when they do involve him in the run game on some of these jet sweeps. It's shocking just the ease that he can do that in maneuver. When he's really best at wide receiver, it's on like deep routes and double moves. I would love to see him on like an offense like Kansas City, or just any scheme that really empowers his athleticism. Under the right tutorship and in a fitting scheme, I think he can really be a weapon at the next level, man. I would love to see him just show out at the HBCU Pigskin Showdown like I know he will. Get noticed by some scouts, get noticed on the NBC Sports Network, right? And get a shot at that next level.
Yeah. And the thing with Alabama A&M, I mean, they've produced a lot of receivers the past couple of years. I know, I think it's there's a receiver last year in the USFL, I think, on the Breakers. I'll have to look up the stats really, or look them up really quick. But Connell Maynor and that offense out in Alabama A&M, Connell Maynor, former pro quarterback. I believe he was a former arena football quarterback, so he loves to sling the ball around. Last year, Queel Glass came from Huntsville, Alabama. So it's just a great program that's producing a lot of talent out wide, and Isaiah Cox continues that, and it's just good to see. As for the receiver last year that ended up getting some time last year in the USFL, that receiver was, my phone would load. Let's see, that receiver was, of course it's slow right here. D. Anderson, yeah. D. Anderson last year, also a former HBCU Pigskin Showdown alum. So last year he had 12 touchdowns in 33 catches, and then he got an extended look with the New Orleans Breakers in USFL. And then even last year too, Abdul Fattah Ibrahim, 67 catches, 1,008 yards. So again, and Xavier Moore, another HBCU Pigskin Showdown alum too, with 381 catches last year, or 381 yards. So a lot of talent that Alabama A&M is putting out a receiver in. It's really worth a look out there down in Huntsville. They got a great program out there.
Absolutely, man. Anytime that you can find a school that it consistently develops talent at a certain position, of course, it speaks to their recruiting level, right? But it also speaks to the development program that they have in place for that position group in particular. So love seeing that at Alabama A&M. Omar, no shame if you don't know it. Do you know off the top of your head, like anything about Alabama A&M's like wide receiver coach or just who it is in general? I'm looking it up as we speak. That's something I should have looked up before probably. But
I do not at all. But I do know, yeah, like Connell Maynor, it's kind of interesting too. You see like a lot of these coaches that have like sort of playing experience in, the Arena Football League, in leagues like to pass the ball a lot. Like, yeah, like Connell Maynor did play for looks like 9 years. Well, actually 10 years in the Arena Football League. Guys like that love to sling the ball around. So I can imagine it would be one of his teammates in Arena Football. But yeah.
yeah, absolutely, man. I'm trying to look at it. I don't see anything on here. Could be missing assistant head coach and I don't see it, man. Trying to find it. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, we got way off topic. But no, that's awesome to see. I know anytime, like I said, you can find a program like that. That's always good news, especially for the HBCUs that don't always get the love, right, that they need. So that's awesome to see. We'll go ahead and go into our main portion talking about college football awards, what we started on, right? This week, we're going to be talking about the Doak Walker Award, which goes to the best running back in the nation. Omar, I will say it is unusual this late in the season, from my understanding, that we don't have a semifinalist list officially from the Doak Walker Award. So we're kind of going to be playing it by ear a little bit. I think we're going to go with our top three guys. I would be shocked if one of these guys was left off of that semifinalist list, but it is something that we'll talk a little bit about that discussion, probably throw in a couple group of five guys that we like that should be included and kind of move on from there. But Omar, we'll go ahead and go. If the Doak Walker Award was up to you, who would be in third place today?
So third place for me would be Mo Ibrahim from Minnesota, and his numbers aren't the best. Keep in mind he missed a game, but Mo Ibrahim has rushed for 100 yards in every single game that he's played on against Minnesota. That includes some games where Minnesota lost by multiple scores. So you look at a guy that really is the heart and soul of that offense. I mean, and this is a guy that's been overshadowed throughout his career. He's been in a shared backfield with Rodney Smith earlier in his career. Then in 2019, Rashad Bateman really showed himself on the national stage, being a great deep threat for
Tyler Johnson a few years ago.
Yeah, Tyler Johnson as well. Yeah, exactly. You just like you're making the point like even better. Like he's been overshadowed. Like this year, he really is the guy. He's the main weapon on this offense. And all due respect to Tanner Morgan, but he's not having as great a year as we know he can have. So I got Mo Ibrahim at number 3, and again, 100 yards every single game. And if you think about Minnesota, they love to run the ball. That's what PJ Fleck loves to do. Ever since his days at Western Michigan, they've had great backs. This year, he's got 1,261 yards in 9 games. A guy for me that just misses a cut. So 2 guys for me that just missed the cut are Dwayne McBride and Brad Roberts. So Dwayne McBride is the second leading rusher in the country, and he's only played 9 games. He has 1,407 yards. He sat out of the Alabama A&M game in the first game of the year. Has 17 touchdowns. It's just insane to imagine like how much better his stats would be if he played in that paycheck game. And you just look at UAB, the great running backs they've had before, whether it be Jordan Howard before the program shut down temporarily, and then you have Spencer Brown, a guy who's under the radar for UAB for much of his career. Great backs there. Then for Air Force, Brad Roberts, for what he's doing as a fullback, averaging 124 yards per game and having 1,241 yards and 13 touchdowns for Air Force, it deserves a look, and it deserves more than the Loman Trophy for fullbacks. But I mean, he's as good, honestly, as any back as any back in the country, as any running back in the country. I think that he could thrive in any good inside run scheme, whether it be Michigan's offense, whether it be Iowa's offense or Illinois' offense. I think he could thrive in there, even though he's a fullback.
Absolutely, man. No, I love that, and I agree that Minnesota. I love that you say that his stats are the best, man. He's like a top 5 rusher in the country, at least in rushing yards. So it's just like speaks to that, and also he has like a touchdown in every single game. So it's hard to say that his stats aren't up there. Like that's not his selling point, which speaks even more of where he is on that. So no, that I love that. That's awesome to see, and I love that you're giving some love to a Power 5 guy, man. It's not always the. I was expecting that kid from Air Force to be number 3 for you. So love seeing that. Awesome, man. Well, hey, I'll go ahead and go. If it were up to me, my third guy today, man, I have to go with Chase Brown. Love Chase. Initially, I had him at 2. You kind of talked me out of that. We'll go ahead and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But man, Chase Brown, he was having 100-yard game in every single game up until the Purdue game last year, which kind of makes you think, right? Maybe they wouldn't have lost to Purdue if they kind of stick to the run game a little bit more. Doesn't really have the touchdowns, at least stat wise, only 7 on the year, right? One thing that I'm not well adversed in Illinois' offense, but typically what that tells me is like, man, they're probably like using him a lot in the beginning and then like setting up the play action pass with that, right? Which is just like a critical part of any offense that is run based. That's how you're going to get explosiveness when your quarterback isn't necessarily up there. When you don't have CJ Stroud at quarterback, that's how you're going to compete, right? So love seeing that. Omar, what do I always say? If you can't catch, if you can't play, has at least a reception in every game this year and 3 more receiving touchdowns on the year. So including 150-yard game against Minnesota. So love seeing that from a running back. It's becoming more and more critical as we're seeing these trends in the NFL. So man, have to go with Chase Brown as my number 3.
So Chase Brown was probably, I guess, a lot of people's, kind of sleeper favorite midway through the year before Illinois sort of went on their side. But I just think that's the Brett Bielema effect. Like, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say, like, I think Illinois in the next few years will have a Doak Walker Award winner with the way that offense is. Because you think about it, it's pretty much the same scheme that, produced Monte Ball, Melvin Gordon. Well, I mean, by that time already, Brett Bielema was head coach at Arkansas, but the principles lasted. So, Chase Brown is having a great year, and I'm surprised to see like him being such a prolific pass catcher given that offense. But yeah, like, I mean, if it weren't for the slide, honestly, he would be number 2 on a lot of people's lists, if not winning, honestly. And this weekend with Illinois versus Michigan, that would be a game that would probably decide the Doak Walker. But at this point, I feel like it's already decided with my number 1 guy, pending, I guess, adverse events. So
I do want to say, obviously, he was helped off the field with that leg injury in I believe the final minute against Purdue, right? So that is something that will be his status is TBD, I believe, as we're recording this late Tuesday. So I'm not completely sure, but that would be my guess. So hopefully he's back on there. Hopefully he can get back up to the top, but something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like for my number two guy, then it is Chase Brown for that matter. Um, I think you hit everything, Jackson. Honestly, again, like this weekend's game against Michigan would have been sort of like that Doak Walker face off. I mean, we kind of it's so rare in these days that we get a face off between two great running backs. I kind of look at the 2013 Independence Bowl where you had Andre Williams, a Heisman finalist in 2013, and you had Kadeem Carey and all the other All-American running back going against each other. I feel like that was sort of the end of an era where we don't really get these matchups. We're always talking about, oh, these two quarterbacks are going to play each other. Like, this is a great quarterback matchup, a great quarterback duel. We never really have running back duels, and we'll have that. Hopefully Chase Brown plays. Excuse me. But again, this Saturday, if Chase Brown plays and Blake Corum plays, then it's kind of a throwback to a different era when like you would look at, hey, like these two running backs are playing, and like this is just something to mark on the calendar.
Absolutely, man. No, I will go ahead and go with I think it's going to be kind of funny how this ends up working out, of where my number 3 guy was your number 2. My number 2 guy, Blake Corum, the running back from Michigan. My only complaint with him, and this is something that is completely out of his control, is just generally that he's undersized, right? He's 5'8", 200, again, completely out of his control. But the thing I love about him, of him being undersized, is that he's not strictly a speedster and he's not strictly a power back, right? Like, he's got a really fine balance of the two where he combines those and use them to his advantage. And it just makes it where it's fun to watch, right? And that's already a very good offense. But Blake's a lot of fun to watch. If you haven't watched him already, go ahead and take some time out of your Saturday to watch Michigan. And obviously, I'm sure we'll all see him against Ohio State, which is going to be the truest test for him all year. So yeah, I don't have much to say. Omar, I'll let you take the lead on that, as I believe Blake is your number 1 guy. Am I correct?
Yes, I have Blake Corum winning the Doak Walker Award because, I mean, his stats aren't better than Chase Brown's, but Blake Corum is the only running back that's in the Heisman talk right now. I mean, especially because Michigan's doing great this year. They're undefeated right now. They have Illinois. They should head into the Ohio State game as an 11-0 team this year. I mean, Corum's got over 1,300 yards already. They're starting to feed him more. If you look at his signature performance, in my opinion, he kind of has like that signature performance in front of the country where you had, 33 carries, 177 yards against Michigan State. Other great performances included 243 yards against Maryland. He's had 100 yards in 7 straight games. Blake Corum pretty much is the centerpiece of the Michigan offense. And to be honest, if he has a game like wasn't him last year, it was Chris Evans that had the great game. But if he has a game where he carries the Michigan offense on their back, which they're going to want to keep CJ Stroud and that offense off the field, they're going to want to run the ball a ton. And Ohio State knows that. But Ohio State I guess the perception is Ohio State struggles with physicality. We'll see. But if they do struggle with physicality and Blake Corum does end up having a career game, then honestly, Doak Walker is not the ceiling. It's the Heisman, I think. So Blake Corum, though, I mean, honestly, he's just kind of a throwback to great Michigan backs of old, like whether it be Ron Johnson in the 60s, Rob Little in the 70s, Leroy Horde in the 80s. It's got to be back in the 90s I can name, but he's just a throwback to like a great Michigan back, and I feel like that'll just conjure up great feelings within the people who vote for this award. Riders, like, you see the way I'm talking about Blake Corum. That's probably the way that a lot of the riders that vote for this award are talking about Blake Corum.
Absolutely, man. No, I wanted to give you the majority of talking time about Blake, because I know you like I referred to earlier, you had to kind of talk me into me putting him as my number 2 guy over Chase. So, all love for Chase Brown, but man, no, Blake Corum is very impressive to watch. Obviously, that's why he's your number 1 guy. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cheat a little bit, Omar. My first 2 were kind of what I expect the results to be, with a little bit of input of who I like and more my own takes on them. But I'm gonna go just strictly of who I think will win on this, right? I don't necessarily think he is the best, although I think he is the most surefire thing at the next level. I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson, man. Probably the most valued back from an NFL standpoint. He just has everything you need, man. As we're seeing these offenses transition to more two high shell than ever before. One stat that really pops out to me, he has the second most like forced missed tackles. That combined with the fact that he can catch, like he is excellent out of the backfield. He's not Bass and pass pro either. Like he's really, I remember seeing in the offseason, like really worked extensively on his pass protection and his blocking skills. And that's really something that you've seen. So I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson. I wouldn't be shocked to see him win it at all, because I think it's just a love affair with Texas. I mean, this is the guy that has like the Lamborghini NIL deal. Like this is the guy that has like all of the love from a running back standpoint, and there are better stories. I think better running backs for the college level specifically. And I just think people love Bijan, man.
Bijan Robinson's great, but where was he at TCU last week? That's my only thing. Like Bijan Robinson ran for 29 yards and 12 carries against TCU. If Blake Corum even crosses the century mark against Ohio State, then he's got to be.
How's the correlation though for you? Do you think Texas lost because they didn't use Bijan Robinson enough, or do you think they didn't use Bijan Robinson enough because they lost? Like, which one do you think more contributes to it?
I mean, in essence, I think that's a classic, when Peyton Manning was out for the year. It's like Peyton Manning should win MVP because he's not playing. It's not the best running back that we did not give the ball to. It's the best running back in the country because we gave him the ball, And that's just my thing. It's like even then, it's not like Texas didn't give him the ball. He had 12 carries. But he had 29 yards. He had 12 carries for 29 yards. And if you take away his long run of 9 yards, he had 11 carries for 20 yards. He averaged less than 2 yards a carry for.
But also when you're loading up like 8 guys in the box because that's their best guy on offense, and Gwen Evers didn't even complete a pass until the second quarter, that helps too, right?
It also helps too, but again, like he also you mentioned loading the box, but Robinson didn't catch a pass either. So that's just my thoughts too. I feel like again, like you think these teams are loading the box against Michigan. Like they got to be loading the box against Michigan. Michigan's averaging less than 200 yards per game passing. I think they're averaging less than 200 yards per game passing, but I'm going to check that really quick. Yeah, Michigan's averaging at the moment just a shade over 200 yards per game passing, right? So you think they're loading the box to stop Blake Corum. Like you think that they would, but I mean they're Blake Corum still finds a way to get over 1,349 yards, and it's like, I kind of wondered too. It's like, I feel like that's more so, not so much them loading the box, not so much TCU loading the box. But you don't think Kansas State was loading the box against Bijan Robinson when he ran for 240 yards. But again, like external factors, you're right. Quinn Ewers not completing a pass in the second quarter does hurt his performance, but I just look at what have you done in big games, and Blake Corum's performance against Ohio State and in the Big Ten title game should be enough for him to, if he performs very well, should be enough for him to get the award in comparison to Bijan Robinson.
I agree with you, man. I'm just saying, I think we give these voters too much credit sometime, right? They do need to watch the film from a college perspective, because I'm guilty of this, where I tend to watch it from an NFL perspective. It's not what this award is being like voted on, right? Of who projects the best at the next level. Like this is about like who's the best for their team and the best for that. That's the beauty of college football, is there's a million different ways to win, right? So that's my opinion. I hope I'm wrong on that. All love for Bijan. Like I said, I think he is the most surefire thing at the next level. I would definitely take him over Blake Corum if I was making a pick in the draft, but not necessarily for college football awards purposes. So we'll go ahead and go into our last part of the program, going over our games of the week to watch. Omar, again, hard to believe that we're going into the next to last week. I was telling a buddy of mine today, like, man, all year we've been talking about on the pod, like we're going to find out who these teams are in this game. We know who these teams are. Now we can just kind of like, to a degree, sit back and enjoy and get some popcorn and watch the drama unfold.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I agree. It's like now it's just kind of, at least from an FBS perspective and FCS, filling that bracket. If you're in the FCS, like who's going to get the seeds, and filling out those bowl projections. So again, like it's there's no
November
wondering.
Madness time. Everyone's filling out their
Exactly.
brackets.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great time. I've been doing a lot of sitting, relaxing lately. Yeah, I also want to say, like, hardware was live at Notre Dame Navy last week. But I got to say, what a game! That's probably the best Notre Dame Navy game of my lifetime, the best one since 2014 at least. But commend the midshipmen on their performance against Notre Dame. Honestly, one of the more underrated games of the week. But
Did you
yeah, so I guess
the orange like construction helmets for hardware? The
yeah, we do. We
hardware.
need helmet stickers. That's what we
About
need.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'll start with my first game of the week. And again, I have a clean sweep of FCS games. Just talking about the scenarios across the landscape. So for my first game, I'm gonna stay in the Ivy League and do a little two-piece combo and talk about two games at once. So this weekend, a four-way tie for the Ivy League title is at stake between Penn, Princeton, Harvard, and Yale. So going to the first game, we got Penn and Princeton. Princeton last week lost an upset against Yale, a Yale team that's kind of rebuilding last year. I think they went 5-5 last year, if I'm not mistaken, but they struggled last year. So Yale, if they beat Harvard, they will clinch a share. I think they've already clinched a share of the Ivy League title at this point. But if they win against Harvard and Princeton loses, Yale will win it outright for their second outright Ivy League title in the last 4 years, after not having an outright Ivy League title from 1981 all the way to 2016. Penn and Princeton, both schools are allowing less than 20 points per game and 100 rush yards per game. Should be a very physical game. Harvard and Yale, there's a lot of star power, a lot of great players. Aiden Bourget, who ran all over the place in the Yale Bowl when I saw the game in 2019. When I saw the game in 2019, I should emphasize the game. Bourget has 1,100 yards in less than 9 games. He's a very efficient runner. Averages 6.7 yards per carry, about at least 6. I forget the decimal. 6 yards per carry on the year. And he should be a late round pickup next year when he's draft eligible. Let's see, is next year? Either this year. I think he's a senior this year, but I think he has a grad year available, which will probably transfer. He could be a late round pickup, honestly, and he should be. On the other hand, Yale has Nolan Grooms, a pretty solid quarterback, who has 700 non-sack rush yards in 9 games. And Yale always has these great quarterbacks that move very well. When I was in college, it was Kurt Rollins, who I got to see twice, a great scrambler who ran for 100 non-sack rush yards against Harvard in 2019. But this game, like these two games, how often do you get to see a 4-way tie for first place? So definitely root for Penn and root for Harvard this weekend if you want to see a 4-way tie.
We love chaos, Omar. That would be phenomenal to see. I think we went over some of the reasons last week when I had my Ivy League game and my games of the week to watch of why it's so significant to have. Just as a reminder, in case if you didn't hear last week's episode, there is no conference championship game. Like this is it. Like it's just after the regular season standings. So no, absolutely, man. I'll go ahead and go with my first game of the week to watch. I'm going to go with Boise State at Wyoming. Boise State and Wyoming are first and second place, respectively, in the Mountain West Mountain Division. And that's a division that obviously is still up for grabs with them being 7-3. One kind of game within the game that I do want to point out for when Wyoming is on offense and Boise State on defense, obviously, Boise State has a top 10 passing defense, man. That's something that doesn't really get talked about much, but they have been elite so far this year. Wyoming's strength, thankfully, is running the ball, right? Led by Titus Swin, the running back. Probably just need to rely on him for the whole game, right? Just keep feeding him the ball, especially with it being at home. Take control of the clock, and then, hopefully see that. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to see. This is one of the handful of divisions that is still up for grabs this late in the year, because a lot of these conference championship games that we've been talking about, it's like the Pac-12 and the Big 12, where it's like there aren't there aren't divisions to it, right? So that's one reason I'm looking forward to that. So probably could have done a little bit more, or gotten a little bit more information of what will make this a good game. But hey, you can find out for yourself 7 Eastern on CBS on the CBS Sports Network.
And I mean, Wyoming's given Boise State fits in the past. I mean, 2016, the game that I believe started Josh Allen's trajectory towards stardom and national relevance. Wyoming beat Boise State at home, a ranked Boise State squad at home, and ended up winning the Mountain West Mountain Division in 2016 and going to the Mountain West title game. This year is no different. I mean, Wyoming is the type of team that just hangs around because of the offense they run. They got a nice pro style inside run game. They shorten games, and I expect this year to be no different. Honestly, if this year is a year for Wyoming to beat Boise State again, this year is it, because Boise State struggled. Like we've seen the recipe to beating Boise State with the UTEP game. Gavin Hardison threw 11 passes, and that was it. And UTEP just ran the ball on Boise State. And they played defense. They won the field position battle. They got a punt return for a touchdown and everything. So it's like, that's how you win the field position battle. You run the ball against Boise State, and that's how you beat this Boise State team, at least this year. But I will say, after that UTEP game, Boise State has recovered very nicely. And, for them to be in the position that they are at to, control their own destiny in the Mountain West, it's a very great, it's just a commendation for Andy Avalos and the job that he's done this year for Boise State. So going on to my next game, we have another sort of winner take all type game. Well, we have, I guess, the first winner take all game in FCS I'll talk about. We have Dayton versus Davidson, and over the past past 3 seasons, we've talked about Davidson a good amount with their great shotgun option offense. And if I'm not mistaken, with 357 yards per game, Dayton may lead all of Division I, FBS, and FCS in rushing. So this year's no different, and it's not just one guy. That's the amazing part about this offense. It is not just one guy that is doing all the work, but Dayton has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 guys that have 300 yards rushing or more. So Davidson's doing a great job, but on the other side of the field, Dayton also likes to run the ball, and they like to stop the run. Dayton's allowing less than 100 yards per game running the ball. So it's kind of like what happens when you see the immovable force what happens when you see the unstoppable force meet the immovable object. We'll find out this Saturday with Dayton versus Davidson. Dayton has not been to the playoffs since 2015, and that they've only had one FCS playoff appearance when they lost to Western Illinois in the first round. Davidson, on the other hand, has earned the automatic bid out of the Pioneer Football League in the 2021 spring season and the 2021 fall season. So again, a lot at stake. It's good to see a different playoff team get in the mix in the Pioneer Football League because dynasties are no fun, in my opinion. And this game, the Pioneer Football League does not have a national TV deal like ESPN Plus or Flow Sports. So you will have to find this one on.
Are we really considering Flow Sports a national TV deal now? I didn't realize that meted the threshold. I was looking at one of these games and it was on YouTube, and I was like, you know what? That's still better than Flow Sports.
It is. And this one, and what this game's gonna be broadcast on is still better than Flow Sports, because we broadcast on the Davidson athletic site. So better than Flow Sports still. You don't have to pay for it.
Better.
So even better. But yeah, just a great game.
And it gets some airplay, right? Just pull it up on your iPad, throw it on the TV, you can watch that.
I forgot to mention too, Jake Chisholm probably has the most deserving case. Jake Chisholm out of Dayton has probably the most deserving case of any running back in all of FCS for the Walter Payton Award, because he leads Dayton in rushing with 160 yards and receiving 239 yards. I'm not even sure if Deuce Vaughn's doing that for Kansas State this year. There's a lot of talk. I think Deuce Vaughn was close to doing that last year, or he did it last year. But Jake Chisholm is pretty much the Deuce Vaughn of Southern Ohio, and it'll be great to see him in a big game next week.
Zach Wilson of the Seven Hills and the Deuce Vaughn of Southern Ohio. That's excellent.
Yeah, the Deuce Vaughn of Southern Ohio.
Deuce Vaughn just absolutely decimated Baylor's defense. That was tough to watch, man. They did. It's just excellent. I'm going to go ahead and go with the game that earlier on in the year we all thought would be College game day for this week instead of Montana State. I'm going to go with USC at UCLA. Now, you might think this, or I think this at least, UCLA probably has the weakest home field advantage in the Power 5 outside of Miami, right? who's not to say USC fans don't just make the drive over to the Rose Bowl and raid that? Like, it's certainly possible. We haven't seen any other school really willing to make the trip to LA, and who can blame them just to go there, right? But it's certainly something that's already convenient. They can sleep in their own house at the end of the night. UCLA does not rank in the top 150 in any major defensive category. USC, on the other hand, is a top 10 total offense, scoring offense, and a top 10 team in third down conversion rate. So UCLA's defense, man, like really has to have their best game of the year to even have a shot. As far as UCLA's offense goes, Omar, I watched a lot of film. I did some deep diving on the analytics. It turns out in order to win the game, UCLA has to score more points than USC. I don't know if you knew that. Just an interesting little tidbit on there. But in all seriousness, my main concern for UCLA is not even the defense. It's we all know at some point the defense is going to break, right? It is, can the UCLA offense put enough points on the board to keep up with USC's offense? If they have to rely on their defense getting multiple stops every, I don't want to say every quarter, but you get what I mean, like more than 5 stops, just not going to go UCLA's favor. So I need to see enough from UCLA's offense to compete, which is ending up going to have to be a lot. And I need USC's offense to either make a mistake, right? Or I need UCLA's defense, like I said, to step up and have their best game of the year if they want to have a shot. And hey, if you're a UCLA fan in the area, tickets can't be that expensive. Like, make the trip, like support the home team, man. Like it is on the struggle bus over there. It's one of the most beautiful venues in college football. Like, why not go watch it?
Yeah, and it seems like forever that like both teams are good, are very good at the same time. I mean, I'm not saying that either program was bad at any period of time, but it's like it's always either like USC is in the mix for the Pac-12 title, but UCLA is like an also ran. And it's like the other way around. I mean, this year, like it's kind of like a vintage type thing where it's like, everything is up for stakes. And this one kind of like it was like the 60s and 70s and everything. It is kind of awkward that this game's not on Thanksgiving weekend, of course, thanks to Notre Dame USC, another great rivalry. But again, like I expect to see just a great crowd and a great revitalization of this rivalry. Honestly, like I mean, it's been a while since this rivalry has been this lively. I think with the programs, I mean, with the state of both programs too. You would like to see both this being like an elimination game for like the playoff, but maybe next year it'll be that way. So again, just the battle for LA, just a great matchup for this weekend. I'm gonna go with the game. Well, I'm gonna go with a scenario in a conference, 2 conferences. Well, the ASUN WAC. So I guess we'll call it one conference where buckle up because there is a lot going on with this conference. So the ASUN WAC's procedure, because they essentially merged conferences, but neither plays a full conference schedule. Where all the ASUN teams play all the WAC teams and vice versa. Where the conference has instead, or the 2 conferences have instead resorted to a power ranking that's kind of based on the RPI in college basketball, where it factors in margin of victory, opponent rankings, opponent strength of schedule, literally a math formula. And where even though at the top of this power ranking, you'll find Eastern Kentucky with a rating of 0.756 and Austin P with a rating of 0.7508. At the moment, neither school is eligible for the playoffs because they're not a conference champion in the ASUN. And in the WAC, so as it stands right now, you'd have the winner of Abilene Christian versus Stephen F. Austin would end up receiving the bid due to being the highest ranking conference champion out of either the WAC or the ASUN. And in that game, we have a great Texas rivalry, a rivalry that's lasted in both the Southland and the Lone Star Conference. You have Xavier Gibson from Stephen F. Austin, 54 catches, 950 yards for the Lumberjacks this year. And then you have 3 players with over 7 tackles for loss, anchoring a defense that allows 22 points per game for Abilene Christian. So pretty much the thing is, Abilene Christian beats Stephen F. Austin, that team wins the WAC, and then they wait. It almost feels like the NFL. They have to wait to see if Eastern Kentucky beats Kennesaw State and Austin P ends up losing to I gotta check again because there is a lot of moving pieces. But if Austin P ends up losing to Geez, my mouth is getting dry just like already like talking through this scenario. But if Austin P ends up losing to, yeah, I guess if so, let's go. Let's start with the ASUN. So the ASUN. So Central Arkansas, so the winner of Abilene Christian, Stephen F. Austin, will be compared to Central Arkansas, and then if Austin P or Eastern Kentucky ends up winning, then they would have the highest ranking out of the power rankings, with Eastern Kentucky having the highest one of all. But they need to share the ASUN title. Eastern Kentucky needs to beat Kennesaw State, and Central Arkansas needs to lose to Jacksonville State, who's 8-2. So this scenario is very likely. I'm sorry if your head's spinning, but again, a lot of confusing stuff with the ASUN WAC poll, and it almost feels like an NFL Sunday, like the final NFL Sunday of the season, with all this math and everything being involved.
I think we should post a graphic, since we don't have Scott Hansen to kind of walk us through this.
Or Kornacki.
It's very complicated, but yeah, man, we'll get on that for sure and probably post on the Instagram story.
We need Kornacki from NBC.
One of the more I remember, like, this was a couple years ago when Ben Roethlisberger ended up retiring, and it was so funny because he had an early afternoon game that day on week 17, week 18, whatever the final week was of that year, and he was like on FaceTime with Toby Mack watching Sunday Night Football. That's right, it was Chargers Raiders, waiting to see like how it happened, and where they both could have tied as they were going into overtime, and then Vegas ended up kicking the field goal. Chargers missed, Steelers hopped in. It was just like so funny. Like, you don't know if you played your last professional football game or not off of Las Vegas and Los Angeles playing. You were just waiting for the result of that, which came very close to being left out, right? Because all they needed was it for not to tie, I believe. So yeah, just interesting little memory of that. And I'm sure these players will have a similar experience as they're all streaming that. Omar, where can we even watch these games? Is it going to be ESPN Plus, I believe, is the contract?
Yeah, so you can find these games on, let me open the tab that I have open, or that I closed to find the tiebreaker scenario. You can find both these games on ESPN Plus as per times. So if you want to follow this scenario in real time, the first game is going to be Kennesaw State versus Eastern Kentucky. That one will be 3:00 Eastern. Actually, it's interesting because that one will be at 3:00 Eastern. Then Abilene Christian, Stephen F. Austin will be at 3:30 Eastern, and then Austin P also has a chance to win a share of the conference. Austin P is they're already locked in their spot essentially because they play Alabama in the final week of the season. So they just have to, I guess, it's not really a countable game. So I don't think FBS games, if you lose, are counted against the power ranking. So they're locked into their spot already. But
Gotcha.
Eastern Kentucky has the head-to-head over Austin P, if I'm not mistaken.
Assuming they don't beat Alabama. So
assuming they don't beat Alabama, which big if. But yeah, Austin P does have the head-to-head over Eastern Kentucky, but again, it's all based on the power ranking. It's just weird, and it's just kind of a consequence of conference realignment in the end.
Definitely, man. We're seeing a conference realignment. You think it's complicated at the FBS level, move on to the FCS, and there's no one to walk you through it. You have to figure it out yourself. I'll go ahead and go with my last game of the week to watch. I'm going to move down to the FCS level. I'm going to go with North Dakota at North Dakota State. Omar, take a picture. NDSU actually isn't in sole first place of the NVFC. Saturday's game really should decide second place of who is going to be second to South Dakota State. If you don't know much about North Dakota State's offense and you're just thinking of like Carson Wentz and Trey Lance and all these offenses that they've had in the past few years, think again, man. And North Dakota State is averaging 252 rushing yards per game, only 10 passing touchdowns on the year, only 2 wide receivers with more than 15 catches on the year. This is a run-first offense. That said, it is running back by committee, and that committee is larger than the college football playoff committee, man. They don't have a running back with over 100 carries this year. They have 8 different players that have scored a rushing touchdown this year. Their quarterback, Cam Miller, also has 6 rushing touchdowns. Like, he can run it a little bit as well. this North Dakota State offense is not the one that you saw like as a kid. This is a different offense. This is run first. It's fun to watch. North Dakota should definitely give a challenge, but in the Fargo Dome, of course, it's hard unless you're South Dakota State. It's hard to go there and win. So it's going to be fun to watch. You can watch that 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN Plus.
And again, like this seems like one of the more open FCS playoffs that I can remember. I say this now and watch watch North Dakota State just win it anyway. But but yeah, like it's just interesting as well. I mean that they're not in sole position too, and if any conference is like having a banner year, it's a CAA, which has a lot of teams in contention. I think the running numbers like them having 6 teams, I think end up making the playoffs. So it should be very interesting to see. So staying at the FCS level, we have another winner take all game, another championship game, de facto championship game. We got Gardner-Webb versus NC-A&T. And so Gardner-Webb has never played in the FCS playoffs, and NC-A&T, of course, playing the MEAC. They have not been to the FCS playoffs since at least 2015. I wasn't sure. I couldn't find the exact year. But you kind of have a contrast of styles here where Gardner-Webb likes to throw the ball a lot. They have a talented quarterback in Bailey Fisher who has 2,191 yards in 9 games for Gardner-Webb for the Running Bulldogs, who are fresh off a victory in the North Carolina Barbecue Bowl, in the East-West Barbecue Bowl against Campbell, winning that supremacy for North Carolina Barbecue. And then for NC-A&T, you have Bayshul Tootin, who has 1,255 yards rushing and counting for the Aggies. So again, a playoff spot will be determined in this winner take all game. Great to see games like this have such a big stage in the final weekend. And that's kind of something that, I guess like college, like I guess FBS does have that sort of like playoff game type of scenario, but it's like not directly. It's like kind of like with strings attached. I mean, here in the playoff, like you have, hey, if you win, you're in the playoffs, you win your conference, you're in the playoffs. If not, have a nice offseason. This game will be at 12 o'clock Eastern on ESPN Plus. I'm gonna stay in the FCS and just talk a little about some playoff scenarios. Gotta mention Holy Cross at 10-0 on their way to a seed. It's kind of funny because if Holy Cross ends up losing to Georgetown, especially if they lose to Georgetown who's 2-8, then they're likely out of a seed. But again, they play Georgetown who's 2-8. They're on the road against Georgetown at Cooper Field. Matthew Sluka is the story. Matthew Sluka and Jalen Coker. Jalen Coker has 10 touchdown catches and 42 receptions. Sluka has 2,000 pass yards, 22 touchdowns, 841 rushing yards, and 8 touchdowns. If Sluka crosses 1,000 yards, I got to think he's going to be a finalist for the Walter Payton Award, for the Walter Payton Trophy, if not helping his campaign for next year. It's been just a joy to see Matthew Sluka just, do his thing the past 2.5 years out there on the Seven Hills. So that is another scenario to watch. As for great rivalry games, you have Lafayette versus Lehigh, the most played rivalry game in college football. No matter how poorly teams do each year in and year out, this is a game to watch. You need to put at least a screen on Lafayette Lehigh. There's gonna be a lot going on, but put a screen on it. Even though both teams have 2 wins, out in Florida for the Florida Classic, out there at the Citrus Bowl Stadium, if it's even called that, out in Orlando, you have Florida A&M fighting for an at-large playoff spot against Bethune-Cookman. Now, I don't think Florida A&M will get that playoff spot because of how uncompetitive they were against Jackson State, losing 59-3 in the Orange Blossom Classic to begin the year. But again, that is something that they're fighting for. They have even talked to the NCAA about the possibility of hosting a playoff game, where the NCAA does site visits to campuses to see if they're suitable for hosting playoff games. So that's something to keep in mind as well. They're still alive, but I think it's a long shot. Just because of that loss to Jackson State, they play a Bethune-Cookman squad that's 2-8 and had a tough go over this year. And it's always a party out there in Orlando. If you need a warm up for the Bayou Classic, then the Florida Classic on ESPN Plus at 2:30 Eastern is the way to go. Get your Cheez-Its out, because now the Citrus Bowl is now the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Get your Cheez-Its out and some orange juice and watch the Florida Classic. But I'm excited for this.
That just doesn't seem right, Omar, oddly enough.
It does not seem right at all. But this is how it is. I mean, I'll have fun with it. We all will. Anytime there's some food. But before we go, Jackson, I forgot to briefly mention that our discussion on the Heisman race. I guess who do you have? I guess is your top 3 really quick. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. It's not even like difficult to say. It's just that I think a lot of it depends on like Michigan, Ohio State. It depends on what we see. We know we're getting like Georgia and LSU, but like what's going to be the feeling going into the SEC championship of like Tennessee's relevance and all that, right? So I think a lot is riding on that. CJ Stroud, Hendon Hooker, Drake May, like Blake Corum tend to be like at least like the betting favorites, which is my favorite thing to look at. I think Stetson Bennett you could throw in there as well, although it doesn't really seem like Georgia's winning many games because of Stetson Bennett. Brock Bowers, really, honestly, man, like if there's going to be a non-quarterback that wins it, honestly, it should be him, although Chase Brown is a close second. So, Deuce Vaughn, I've even seen like on that list. Like it is wide open right now. I think CJ Stroud is the favorite just because Ohio State is playing at a level above Ohio State, even what we're used to. But I don't know, man. Honestly, too much riding on these last 2 weeks that I really like. I don't know, man. It's still wide up in there. So what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I'll follow up your list with a question after I mentioned mine. So for me at the top, I have a slash between CJ Stroud and Blake Corum. I really think the winner of that game will end up going 13-0 because the Big Ten West is something, to say the least. It is very intriguing to say the least. It'll end up probably like last year where you have an overmatched Big Ten West team playing either Michigan or Ohio State. In that case, last year was Michigan, Iowa, where it's just like not even a game from the jump. So I really have at the top Blake Corum or CJ Stroud. Whoever wins that game, or if CJ Stroud ends up not looking very good against Ohio State and the defense performs well, then I guess Blake Corum winning it all. Number two, I still have Hendon Hooker as my number two guy because again he's done wonders this year for Tennessee, done an absolutely great job for that program. And number three, I have Caleb Williams because Caleb Williams, if you look at all the losses or I guess the one loss for USC, none of them have really been Caleb Williams' fault per se, because the defense kind of faltered against Utah. And on the year, Caleb Williams is quietly having a great year. I mean, it shouldn't be quietly, but it's quietly because he's on the West Coast playing for USC. They don't get those big noon kickoff spots, but he's got 31 touchdowns and 2 picks. So just to recap, I have Blake Corum / CJ Stroud, got Hendon Hooker, and then I got Caleb Williams for my top three. But it's kind of funny. Like, why aren't either of us mentioning Stetson Bennett? I mean, Stetson Bennett arguably had a Heisman moment with the call me maybe touchdown. So, but I just got to ask you because you watch the SEC way more than I do. Like why aren't we mentioning Stetson Bennett's name in the Heisman race more?
Because I don't think Georgia is winning because of Stetson Bennett. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't think so. I think you put in a lot of quarterbacks in there and they're winning a good bit. I don't think it's going to be because I think it's because of that defense. I think it's because of their run game, although their wide receivers really have not been bad either. So I just don't think like Stetson Bennett is, like I said, the reason that they're winning. If you're going to win the Heisman, you need to be the reason your team is winning, right? Or at least a very significant part of it. So that's my opinion, at least. But
yeah, so my thing with Stetson Bennett, I think he's definitely worthy. I think I would have him at 4, frankly, because you look at his stats, he's got 2,895 yards. That's 13th in the country. Yeah, sure, Georgia's not winning because of Stetson Bennett, but it's like, I mean, you can make the case that they wouldn't be winning without him. It's just like, it's just his touchdown numbers are low, and I feel like that hurts him because, of course, Georgia likes to run the ball. But I mean, I'm surprised to see he's 13th in the country in passing yards. Are you surprised?
yeah, I would say I'm surprised. Yeah. Yeah, I would. That's fair.
I mean, that's already more than he had last season. Yeah, that's already more than he's had last season. And of course, again, like I mentioned, the touchdowns last year, he had 29 touchdowns and he was not in the Heisman discussion. This year, he's got 14 passing touchdowns. And again, like he's kind of in the discussion. He's kind of not. He's got 7 touchdowns on the ground though this year, but I don't know how much that does because like a lot of us don't view Stetson Bennett as a dual threat quarterback, so again, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, I mean, maybe he gets invited to New York, but I don't see him winning it like you either because that perception, honestly, because I share that perception too, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Like I said, so much can happen in these last 2 weeks. Like there's still a lot. I think it's even more like less than even the results of the games. It's more like just the feeling surrounding the committee, the feeling like going into conference championship week, because that is when the voting ends, right after the conference championship. So that's my opinion. But yeah, we'll see, man. I'm excited for another great week.
I am too. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.